Now, if you're facing repossession or you've lost your job, the last thing you'd need is to be charged £30 every time you go overdrawn. Lots of people have successfully claimed refunds on the basis that the charges made by banks are unfair. But around 1 million people have had their claims put on hold until a long-running test case at the High Court concludes. The only exception is for those people in severe financial difficulty. But as our money reporter Bridget Nzeku reports, there's evidence that some banks may be turning their backs on legitimate claimants.
Lynn Thomas from Buckinghamshire contacted her bank HSBC in August last year to claim back £1,400 in bank charges. She believes she should have a refund because she's unemployed and has narrowly avoided repossession.
The money that we've got to pay the bank and the mortgage, I'd say sort of like 80% of our income goes straight out again, and then we just manage on what's left.
A month after her claim, HSBC wrote back saying they didn't consider she was suffering financial difficulties as defined by the banking code. But banking regulations specifically cite loss of employment and court proceedings as evidence of financial difficulty. Under the banking code, the banks have promised we will do all we can to help you overcome your difficulties. And the code explicitly states that banks will not subject customers to harassment or undue pressure when discussing their problems. But Lynn Thomas says she and her partner were bullied into rolling their debt and charges into a new loan, paying much higher interest.
We were called constantly, we were told that we can't help you and it was for our benefit. And I think it was sort of sold to us in such a way that really if you don't have it, we will close your account, we will pass it to a DCA, debt collection agency, and really it's going to be a lot worse for you.
HSBC denies knowing she was unemployed and has told Channel 4 News it will review her case. In a statement, the bank said,
"In keeping with our approach, we discussed Miss Thomas's financial situation with her and determined that she had sufficient income to meet her essential expenses. It's quite likely that she'll now be having difficulty meeting her essential expenses. As such, we will contact our customer to discuss her situation and review her claim for financial hardship."
And in relation to her complaint about being telephoned constantly, HSBC said,
"We do not harass our customers, but if our calls and letters are not answered, we have no option but to continue to try to get in touch."
Since 2007, HSBC and other high street banks have received more than 97,000 complaints about bank charges from customers claiming financial hardship. But only in 24,500 cases did the banks agree that those customers were having serious financial problems. That's just 1 in 4 of all original complaints. And not all of those people got a full refund. In many cases, they were paid just a fraction of their total claim.
Anecdotally, it seems that there is a growing problem here. What we do know is that banks are treating people very differently. Some banks treating people fairly, some banks treating people quite appallingly. What we want to see is more consistency across the board so people who are in difficulty are getting back the money they need.
The recession means it's likely that more people will need to ask banks to refund charges. But will they get the sympathetic hearing the banking regulations guarantee?
Well, I'm joined now by Brian Capon from the British Bankers Association and from Glasgow, Robert Cumming of the Consumer Action Group. Brian Capon, well, there's one example of someone who was clearly in financial hardship. She's lost her job. The bank said, "We don't recognise that you are." They now seem to be recognising they made a mistake. And the point is there must be thousands like her because only 1 in 4 of people who claim financial hardship are accepted by the banks.
Well, certainly when the FSA agreed the waiver, they made it very clear in that banks would look at cases of financial hardship. But it certainly seemed from the clip that we saw there that perhaps the customer's circumstances had changed. I think it's very important that people do keep in touch with the bank if circumstances do change, which can have a material effect on whether they can afford to repay money that they owe.
Well, she clearly did, and the bank didn't accept her initial situation. They only do after television gets involved and it turns into a media story.
Well, obviously I can't comment on that particular case, but certainly just going for what I've seen there, it does seem the situation has changed. And again, it's important when banks want to talk to customers that they will make telephone calls, they will try and get in touch with them. It's important to talk to the people you owe money to.
But you think the 3 out of the 4 people who are being turned down are falsely claiming? They're not actually in financial hardship?
I think it's important that we look closely at the individual situation, and it's important.
But do you think you're getting it right?
I think the banks, by and large, are getting it right. Of course, there will be cases that do go slightly wrong. Again, that communication is very important.
Robert Cumming. Well, here we have the British Bankers Association saying, on the whole, they think they're getting it right.
Well, the Consumer Action Group has about 200,000 members, and we've been monitoring this situation very closely. As far as we can tell, it is absolutely business as usual for the banks. I mean, you talk about 24,000 cases in terms of the number of people in the country we believe are in that hardship situation. That's a very small minority. Part of the problem here is that the barriers the banks are putting in place to people to get their hardship claims, forcing them to fill out a 3-page income and expenditure form, for example, which they have to give to the teller, forcing them to go through it in front of the bank, and the bank deciding what's acceptable income and what they don't really need to spend.
Well, what's wrong with that?
Well, you would argue that if somebody is on benefits, then by definition they're in hardship, realistically. And fundamentally, the thing that's wrong with it, of course, is it's their money. They're trying to claim back bank charges, which have been charged by the banks. And as we've seen from the test cases, 4 High Court judges now have said that the OFT is allowed to make a judgment on these matters. The OFT have already given a preliminary indication that they consider the charges to be unlawful. So humiliating someone in that way to get their own money back is just very, very unfair. The other side to all of this, I might add, is the banks pursuing people for debts, continuing to pursue people to recover bank charges, even against their own guidelines, the OFT's code of conduct for pursuing debts. Even though the charges are in dispute, they're still pursuing people for them.
Brian Capon.
Well, firstly, I would have to say that the courts have not found that the charges are unlawful. The case is still going through as to whether...
No, but the OFT have, in a preliminary way, said so, and 4 High Court judges have said that the OFT can...
The case is still going through there, and they have not found to be unlawful. The key there is that, customers do have to advise the bank, they do have to complete the forms so that the bank knows what their financial situation is.
Do you not think, given now the extent to which your members are being bailed out by taxpayers, you're going to have to change your attitude on this and be a little bit more amenable towards the realities of the economic situation?
Some banks have received certainly help from government in supporting the lending that they do. But I think what we've, again, got to look at is those charges themselves can be avoided completely simply by not going overdrawn. But, I mean, once you've incurred those charges, if you are having difficulties, it's important to talk to the bank. And if you feel that the bank is not giving you the response that you think you ought to have, there's certainly the Ombudsman scheme there that you can take that up to.
Brian Capon, Robert Cumming, thank you both very much.